Are you trying to find more time to write and struggling to do that because your life is so busy and crazy? If so, this video is for you. The first mistake that we make, and we all make this, I've done this too, is expecting that we're going to find time in our schedules rather than understanding that we have to make time in our schedules. There's all these things already on the calendar that we have to do. It's near impossible to try to find time. And the other issue with this approach is that it leads to a lot of guilt. We're thinking that we should be smart enough or savvy enough to be able to find this extra time. But then when we get to the end of the week and we haven't found that time, we start to feel guilty. We're blaming ourselves. Man, I wanted to have more time to write this week and I didn't find it. What's the matter with me? It's all kind of a negative downward slope that we go on when we think of it this way. If, on the other hand, we think about making time, that creates a whole different mindset. If you think about your schedule and you know that you have to make time to write, you know that you have to look at that calendar that you've got and you've got to move some things around. The thing that I find most successful when I'm trying to make time is that I need to give something up. Way too often we feel like we can do it all. We can continue to do this really busy schedule that we've already got going and devote extra time to our writing. And when that doesn't happen, like I say, we feel guilty, we feel bad, we feel like we're doing something wrong. Let's ditch the guilt. Let's get rid of all these negative feelings and understand that we are human, we have limited energy, we have limited resources, and so we have to work within those limits to be able to find the time we need. And most of the time that means getting rid of something. There are many ways to do that. Let me talk about that for a second. As I say that it's a good idea to get rid of something, I wonder if you might be thinking, but I can't. I have to do everything that I'm doing right now. That's a really normal response. We don't want to lose anything. We feel like if we give up something or sacrifice something or move something out of the way for a while, that somehow that is a loss. I would invite you to sit down and look at your schedule and see what things you can get rid of. See what things you can sacrifice. Here's my promise to you. When you do that and you fill in that time with writing, as long as you follow through and don't fill that time in with something else, you actually fill in that time with writing, you're gonna feel great. It has happened to me so many times that I've sat down and said, okay, I'm not doing this for the next month, or I'm getting out of this activity for the next however long, or I'm cutting back on these work projects, or whatever it may be. Somewhere that you're making time to write, and yes, you're going to lose something. If you fill in that time with writing, you're gonna feel awesome, because we just do. We feel awesome when we're working on our stories, we're making progress, we're getting the story done. That all feels really positive. So I would encourage you to endure that momentary, that temporary feeling of loss that you might experience when you sit down with your schedule and decide, okay, this is going and this is going so that I have time to write. You're going to feel better when you start putting writing into that time. So give that a try. We are energy machines. Think of yourself like a vehicle. Are you running on empty by the time you're sitting down to write? If that's happening to you, then think about your writing time in terms of your energy instead of the hour on the clock. You've got to ask yourself, when is my energy the highest? And not just your energy as a whole. In other words, we're not just talking about when you're up for walking a mile or doing a few push-ups or whatever. It's not just physical energy, we're talking mental energy. And this is an interesting area because there's also been some studies that say when you're just a little bit tired, you're often a little better at writing, because when you're a little bit tired, your inner editor tends to be asleep. You can just draft the story and let it flow and not be blocked by your inner editor saying, oh, that's not very good, or you got to go back and fix that, or whatever. If you are so tired when you have blocked out the time to write that you just aren't getting any words out, it's probably not the right time for you and you need to reevaluate. But consider that being just a little tired can be a good thing, especially if you're working on your first draft. If you're editing, then you want to be more alert, more awake. That little bit of tired is not going to work for you then, because that's a different part of the brain you're using when you're editing. But if you're creating and you're drafting and you're in the first draft of your story, a little bit of tiredness is okay as long as the writing is flowing. That is the key. Is your writing flowing when you're sitting down to do it? If not, it's not the right time, and go back and find when your energy levels are where you need them to be to have that writing flow. If writing is important to you, it needs to be a priority. I didn't get anywhere in my writing career until I made it a priority. And it felt weird at the time because I wasn't making any money at it. So it felt kind of funny to say, I'm going to set out this time every day to write because this is important to me. It felt a little bit selfish and a little bit funny. Now I realize that's the only way you can approach it. If your writing is still a hobby to you, then you likely forego your writing time whenever anybody asks you to do something. So-and-so asks you to come to a meeting at noon and that's when your writing time is, and you say, sure, I'll be there. If you're doing stuff like that, you're treating your writing like a hobby. If writing is a hobby to you, then no worries. But if writing is more important to you, if you want to progress as a writer and you have certain goals in mind and it frustrates you when you're not getting your writing done, then you're looking at it the wrong way. You need to shift your mindset and say, okay, writing is a priority. When I put down my writing time on my calendar, I will honor that time. That time will not be interrupted unless, there's this huge emergency, a tornado is coming through town or something. I will make that time a priority. When you do that, you're more likely to get your writing done. You may be a plotter, you may be a pantser, or what they call a discovery writer. I'm a pantser myself. I don't plot my stories, but it helps if you kind of have an idea what you're going to do that day for your writing time. So if you plot, then you know the next scene in the story, and that's what you're going to work on when you sit down to write. That can really help you to take advantage of the time you have, even if it's short. If you have no idea what you're going to write that day, it can be tougher to sink into the creative flow that you need to get into to make the words happen. If you are a pantser like me, it doesn't mean that you have to plot out what you're going to do the next day. You simply get to the end of your scene and maybe you stop a little early and you write a few little notes and say, okay, what happens next is such and such. Just that little bit of a note can really help you to sink back into your story during your next writing period. This word is so helpful when it comes to protecting your time, but it's really hard for a lot of writers. I have discovered in my interviews of writers that many of us are people pleasers and we really don't want to disappoint people and we want to help people. So if people are asking you to do this or that or setting up events at this or that time and that's during your writing time, you're not saying no. You're not saying, gosh, sorry, I can't make it. You're not finding the courage within yourself to do that and to honor yourself and the calendar that you've set up for your writing priority. I would suggest you do this. Every time you say yes to someone else, to some other event, to some other happening, whatever it may be, realize that you may be saying no to your writing. Remember that we don't have endless resources. We don't have endless energy. We're going to run out and we're going to have to rest and refuel. If you say yes to this other activity and it saps your energy and it saps your time for writing, then understand that your writing time for that day is going to be gone. And I think often we think, oh, I'll write later. I'll write that night. I would invite you to look at your past, maybe just the past month. If this has happened to you and you've said yes to somebody or yes to some event or thing or whatever, and you promised yourself you would write later, how many times did you actually come back and write later? I've done this myself. The writing later rarely happens because I come home and I'm too tired or things get too late and I know that I'm not going to be able to come up with anything worthwhile for the page. So keep that in mind. If you're saying yes, you're likely saying no to your writing. If you are someone who struggles to say no, I would suggest you practice and realize that you don't have to put an explanation to it. So many times we think you have to explain, well, I can't do it because of this and this reason. We get frazzled because we don't want to admit that we're saying no because we want to devote that time to our writing, because we're afraid other people will say, you're writing, well, can't you do that later? I mean, I've had people say that to me. Surely you can write another time. In their minds, that seems perfectly logical, but that's because they're not writers. They don't understand the obstacles that we're up against in trying to fit writing into our lives. My recommendation would be, do not even mention that. Just say, no, I'm sorry, I can't. Maybe next time. And let it go at that. And if the person protests, you can empathize with them. Yeah, I hear you. I hear that that's an important event and I hope it'll go great for you. I'm just sorry I can't be there. Honor yourself enough to know that you are in charge of your own schedule, your own priorities. It's up to you. You don't owe an explanation to anyone. And people will accept that. When you just stick to your guns, people will accept that. They're not going to think worse of you. And if they do, then, that's their issue, not yours. And I have one bonus way that writers get time management wrong. We think we need large blocks of time to get something done. If your energy levels are where you need them to be, you don't need large blocks of time. You can get something done in 15 minutes. It's kind of funny because if you know you only have 15 minutes, but you're in an energy space where you can create during that 15 minutes, you're going to be able to accomplish something. I would encourage you to try it. Make 15 minutes of time. And the key to doing this well is, number one, like we said before, having an idea what you're going to write in that scene, so you left notes for yourself or you've got an outline if you're a plotter, and then diving right into it. Don't imagine that you need to do a bunch of mental preparation. Oh, I have to have just the right cup of tea. I do this. Just the right cup of tea or coffee. I have to have just the right seated position. I have to check my emails first. I mean, all these things that we think we have to go through. None of that is allowed. Sit down, story, write. If you push yourself to do that, I bet you'll be impressed by what you can actually accomplish. If any of these resonated with you, please let me know in the comments. I'd like to hear about it. Remember that no matter what, even little tiny small changes you make in your schedule can help. And the instant that you start getting more writing done, you're going to feel it. You're going to feel that positive feedback, that motivation, that additional energy. All you got to do is get started. The smallest change will work. Good luck, and I'll see you next time.